I would keep this talk very connected to what we heard from Maria this afternoon and Steve, and also quite connected to the skills panel. If you weren't here, right, I'll let Denise go away and then talk. Right. So my talk title is written The Turing Way, and I don't expect everybody to know what Turing Way is. So I want to spell it out. The purpose of my talk is to talk about open research for responsible adoption of open source. So I'm trying to connect open research with open source, and all my insights are, in this case, coming from the project called the Turing Way. This is an Enigma machine. I work at the Alan Turing Institute in London. We're based inside the British Library. And when the institute was formed, we were given one of the Enigma machine, which is still sitting outside our office. So if you're ever there, message me. You don't have to message me if you just want to see that. But if you want to come inside the office, I'd be very happy to welcome you. So I wanted to give you a bit of background, and every time I give any talk, I try to situate where I am, because I'm very biased based on where I come from and how I got into open science. So I'm from India, northeast of India, and this is my only joke. It's a very small city with 1 million people. I moved to south of India for my bachelor studies in biotechnology. And I really wanted to study computation, bioinformatics, and moved to Germany for my master's. Did my PhD. I got really into open source because of my supervisor, who was working with the Open Knowledge Foundation and introduced us to the world of carbon trees training, where I met quite a lot of people who were teaching themselves how to code and teaching their colleagues how to code. And that was one of the ways I understood what it means to be part of a community. The community isn't just a place where you feel that you are given access to a space, but a place where you also feel that you have something to give back. Because that's how you stay. You don't stay there to listen in, but to be listened to as well. I got really interested in community building, definitely during my PhD, but I finished my PhD, went to European Molecular Biology Laboratory, and started to build community of bioinformatician within the 5 sites that MBIL had. Then I moved to the UK, joined the Alan Turing Institute. I took on a project called the Turing Way, which is a community-led guide on data science. I'll tell you a bit more about that. And I also co-founded a non-profit organization called OLS, Open Life Science. And the reason for OLS was that within life science, if you all are from life science, we're very early on still in the adoption of computation and technology. People are inherently inclined to sharing their work because they're not programmers themselves. They understand that they have to learn from each other and build on community resources. Therefore, resources like Bioconductor, Galaxy, these are really, really valuable for us. Some of us were quite involved in open source, but not everybody. And OLS is a training and mentoring program, which is a cohort-based program where we bring people from different places with the projects that they have and kind of put them through the 16 weeks of training with their mentor, and at the end they have learned a bit more than what they knew, and they can go on with the project that they can now go and build a community with. So all of these have also happened alongside my involvement with other open science communities and different roles, such as an advisory role as a community contributor. So I combine all of these experiences, lived experience, to put into the work that I do. So all of these we have heard in all the different tracks that open source is socio-technical. Socio-technical is how human agency of making decisions is intertwined with the technology that we use, or the outputs from technology that impacts us. Open source, meaning any kind of tools, practices, and systems that we are building, deploying in the world and monitoring them, have socio-technical impact. So I work at the Turing, where our focus has been to look at data science and AI for advancing real-world challenges. And therefore we talk a lot around what does this mean to build responsible and ethical AI. Open source has inspired open science movement. So if we go back to history, of course, open science is part of practices that we have learned from indigenous communities. But in technical terms, open source movement is a lot more older than open science. However, open science movement is completely built on the idea that everybody should be able to freely access, reuse, reproduce, and build on anything which are related to open research. As well as we use the community framework. So what is really powerful about open source is this spirit of collaboration, peer production, and long-term sustainability of the work that we do through collaboration. So this is open science. It is more than just code. We have open data, open platform, open infrastructure, open educational resources, open evaluation, citizen science, etc., etc. So we think about open science as a tool for enabling global research. It combines many forms of open practices to make scientific knowledge open, not by default, but by design, to be intentional with how we open our work and who we give access to. When we talk about open science, the definitions are many, but the basic idea is that there should be no price barrier, there should be no technical barrier. But also, just saying that it should not be doesn't really make something open. We have to make sure that we are thinking about multiple perspectives of people who would be using our resources. So thinking about inclusion, right? So when we say that this should be accessible, we're also saying this should be inclusive by design. Everyone should have access to participate in the system, benefit from the system, and contribute to what they want to use. Right, so I'm kind of switching between open research, open science, open practice, and I would use them as synonyms because they're literally the same thing. Of course, a lot of people who don't work in science, they don't call themselves scientists, and therefore sometimes they don't relate with the word open science. But which is where we kind of switch between open research, open science, but the idea is open practice. How can we open our data, open our code, open our knowledge resources, training material, the way that we collaborate with each other. So open means different thing to different people depending on where they are, what kind of project they're building. Ideally, everybody should know how to open things, but it is not true. You don't get taught often in the university, except if you have Steve Wally running his internship program, but it does not really happen. Our incentive system within academia isn't designed for open. We don't get told that if you open your work, we'll give you extra score. If anything, we're incentivized for competing with each other. So it's very hard to apply that academic mindset if you're switching between sectors. So if you go to government sector, or if you go into industry, or you try to build your own company. Often we don't know what we don't know. And that's where the communities are so powerful. So I want to introduce you to the Turing Way. It's a community-led project on data science. We are an open source, open collaboration, and globally distributed community who are working to make data science accessible, reproducible, and beneficial for as many people as possible. So it's a book. If you look for Turing Way, you will find a web page, very simple Jupyter book with multiple guides. But it is more than a book because it's built by a group of people. So it's a very huge collaborative community all over the world. We are building good practices. We call them best practice, but we also know that practice developed in one part of the world may not be actually appropriate for the other part of the world. So we are designing it in a way that people can come and improve it. But also it's a place where people can advocate for culture change. There are conversations that they cannot have in their own universities, in their own companies, but this is a place of people who have high trust with each other. They also know that when they challenge something that we are writing or working on, they will not be taken as disagreement. They would be taken as a learning opportunity, and how we can always keep this book as an online open source thing that is always a work in progress. So I always talk about that data science practices in 5 years would look very, very different. It would be a mistake if I say we're building a book that can be printed and you'll be fine. But please do not ever print this. There are about 500,000 words in there. But also the fact that you don't probably need everything. And also the fact that you know a lot more than other community about your own project. So there is something to give to the community as well as learn from the community. And this book has to be always a work in progress. So it started as a book on reproducible research. So Reproducibility, in a simple term, we can define for the computational purpose. If you have same data and same code, it should always give the same result. And it's obviously not as true in practice. You need to describe what packages you use, what environment did you run it in, what workflow did you design it for, what version of certain package did you use. So there's a lot more that goes into it. And in the skills panel, we kind of touched into that. So the guide of reproducible research includes things like you can learn about version control, different tools for version controlling, different kinds of license, not just for software, but also data or machine learning. There are a lot of resources on data management practices, reproducible environment, binder hub, etc., etc. But the more we talked about technology in reproducibility, and the more people we had in the community, we realized that it's not just about reproducibility. Responsible technology takes more than just open and reproducible practice. So the project expanded to include another guides for project design, for communication, for collaboration, and ethical research. So we're not writing a book from scratch. Our purpose isn't to write a book from scratch. We want to make things centralized so anybody can just go to this book, find the best resources they need, and dive into the topic that they need to. The books are written in a very digestible, modular way. The chapters are very small. The chapters introduces learners to what they want to learn about, and then guides them to the right resources that their communities are using. So by design, we haven't made it sector specific. It is written for everyone, so it's very agnostic of which field that you come from. But we also have case studies from specific areas of research where people can contextualize what these practices mean. And while we were building this book, we also started to create community handbook. So community handbook is a meta book for the Turing Way. It describes how this book was made, how to contribute to the book, how to apply a certain design principle, how to get credit for your work, how to maintain and review someone else's work. So this is kind of community 101 for people who want to not just work in the Turing Way, but take the model that we have built for the Turing Way to design their own community. So if you go to this link, theturingway.org, you'll come to a start page, and that start page will give you entrance to our GitHub repository, our book. I didn't actually talk about it. It is built on GitHub. It is open from the very beginning. It has the standard processes of like there's a README file, well-maintained contributors guideline. We have a code of conduct, but we also have a page called contributors.md where any contributor of the book can go and write exactly what they did. Because it's a very big project, about 500 contributors so far, people may lose all the work that they have done. They can lose track of what they have done. So we allow them to write about their own work in a way that they can take credit for their own work. But we also give credit to everyone who even fixes the typos or advises someone. We use something called All Contributors Bot, which you can install on any GitHub repository and give credit for people based on what they have done. Right, so there are many pathways to collaboration in the Turing Way. So if you have a different perspective than the current community, you can come and share with others. If you have some experience in open source, you can mentor others who are very new. So we do also take GSOC and GSOC students, but there are a lot of people who are not part of the formal program, but they are coming in to learn and practice how to work on GitHub in an open source project. There are people who call themselves digital janitors. They're cleaning all the broken links. They are taking care of things that they call like, a loose tab or something that is not working and it's bothering them, but nobody noticed. And these people are in the background, but they are the people who keep the lights on. There are also people who go out and train other people on technical skills, taking the Turing Way as resources. Talk about the Turing Way, apply that in their own institute, and not try to reinvent the wheel. So it's very tempting to say, oh, I want my own way. I'm going to just create my own book. Why do I take the Turing Way? But of course, we do have a lot of case studies with people who in the institute were building their own book, but they realize that they have a high attrition rate. So if their team members leave, their book will be outdated because there's nobody to maintain it. So what they did is to collaborate with Turing Way, they moved over anything that was of general audience interest into the Turing Way so the community could maintain it, or anything specific which are like how to apply for reimbursement in your own institute, you keep in your own book because those are very internal process. We also have a community who are translating the book. So we understand that we are a global community. English is not everyone's primary language. So people are building workflow and pipeline, even applying AI tools to make sure that the chapters that we're building in English can be translated, but not just text by text translation, but localization in a way that it applies to the local context of people who might be using it in a French-speaking country or Spanish-speaking countries. We highly put our work in open recognition of all kinds of work. Although I'm here today, I will show you all the people who are actually building this work. So this is last 12 months of data. We have about 87,000 unique users of the book worldwide, except for a few countries, of course. There are 1,000 community members who are on our community workspace. We have over 6,000 monthly users who are not probably engaging with our governance or day-to-day, but they are using our book in their different contexts. We have people translating the book in about 5 languages or more. We have been referenced by many articles, reports, and policies. We have collaborated with more than 50 organizations, and a lot of people have taken the model of the Turing Way to build something in their own communities. And now we are also working with different sectors to understand what it looks like to take the Turing Way as a book of practice and go into different sectors and apply them there. Right, so this is the team. I am lead for this project. Errol Bennett, who is working on another part of my project, which I'll tell you a bit about. Annalise Steele is a community manager who is highly valuable for community to keep the day-to-day running. And we have a project manager as well. And Kirsty is the founder of the project who has now moved to California. But there are many more people. So I wanted to show you deliberately those 4 people who are paid positions who are running this project. But there are many community members who are running different aspects of the book, which may not be formally funded, but they are extremely important to have some conversation, which we already heard about, around how to build the governance for a project which is institutionally funded, but is used by global community. What happens if this institution one day stops funding it? What happens to those 87,000 users? Would we stop serving them? So our committee of working group chairs, representative, anybody who has time to work with us at the higher project level are engaging in the governance related work. Day-to-day community level governance, like chapter writing, training, outreach, are all documented in the community handbook. We also have a hackathon kind of thing called Book Dash twice a year, where people from all around the world can gather for a week and they can either start working on something that is important for their own organization or community, or join other people who are doing something similar. So for example, our data management practices are really, really famous, but also data management across different continents look very different because data compliance and regulation are very different for them. So a lot of them come in and write those case studies with us. And there are these organizational advocacy where people like Carlos in Science Center and Zoe Turner in NHS, Chris Erdman in SciLife Lab, and Lena Karlovskaya, and there are so many other people who are the organizational representatives using the Turing Way, and they have been permitted in their day job to work with the Turing Way. So the Turing Way has support not just from the institutional positions, but also other organizations that use it. And we obviously, I cannot talk about this without the infrastructure maintainers, so we are working with Jupyter Book, Netlify, things which break all the time, and we do require these highly skilled research engineers, one of them working in NASA, another working in a startup called 2i2c, and a few more at the Alan Turing Institute. Right, but these are the actual people who are building all of our resources. One thing that I learned, so it's been about 5 years, is it's one thing to work with the grassroots community. Grassroots community has a lot of energy. They trust in the work that you're doing. They want to be part of it. They want to be out there. They want to learn about open source. They want to have this agency and freedom to contribute to something. But when you go to policymaker and government and your own institute, you are often asked about, so what's the impact? Like, yeah, but we just got cited in 5 national reports. I think that's quite impactful. But that's not the impact they're looking for. They're looking for how can you say that these 1,000 people who are working with you actually go back to their institution and their institution are changing their behavior as a result of these practices. And that's a very big question to ask. Of course, that's not why I work with these 1,000 people. These 1,000 people are given a space where they can do whatever they want based on what they need. So, but I did need to be a bit strategic around, so how do I build those evidence and case studies? So we established the Turing Way Practitioners Hub. This is where the small, medium enterprises within the UK are invited to work with us in a cohort-based basis. So they spend about 6 months of their time with us, talking to each other, learning about best practice from the Turing Way, and bring it back into their own industry setting. So our goal is to enable these organizations to lead innovative, user and community-centric, as well as ethical data science and AI business practices. We are funded by Innovate UK Bridge AI, which is similar to Innovate Ireland, but in the UK, they spend a lot of their budget into improving the UK's economy. And currently, some of their projects are around how do we help small, medium enterprises to adopt AI in a way that boosts economy. And they also want these companies to work together. They want these companies to share their resources. So they funded this consortia, which is joined by UKRI, Hartree Center, Digital Catapult, the Alan Turing Institute, British Standards Institute, and they formed the Bridge AI. And I am with the Turing Way, part of the Alan Turing Institute. The purpose is to build methods and approaches through which we can connect these business. We can bridge expertise between the service part and backend, and upskill high growth potential sectors. And high growth potential sectors include creative industries, agriculture, transportation, and manufacturing. Right, so I experimented. I reached out to 5 organizations which we knew were using the Turing Way already, and invited them to be part of our first cohort where we gave them fellowship. So Office of National Statistics, Genomics Inland, British Antarctic Survey, Energy System Catapult, and DigiHall. DigiHall is one of the startups. Catapult is the place that actually catapults startups. British Antarctic Survey is a mix of research and also hands-on, on-site. For example, they always go to Antarctic to collect data, and they're using AI to optimize their travel route, for example. Genomics England is private, but they are also responsible for national health systems data, and Office of National Statistics, you all know, they do a lot of national level data collection and analysis. So these were really brilliant people to work with because they were very involved with what we wanted to do. They committed to have 6 months with us on working on practices like open source, open data, reproducible practices, and collaborative practices, which was mostly around how do we build communities with them and for them. At the end of their work, they created case studies capturing the state of open source into their organization. They wanted to share the challenges that they face, what kind of cultural differences they have. We did hear in some of the panels about that companies have low appetite for risk. Of course, there are a lot of national responsibility for organizations like Office of National Statistics, but they also wanted to build trust with the community, so they were more proactive at being open. British Antarctic Survey that has both researchers in there and developers in there wanted to find ways to have similar conversation, and having best practices as standards really worked for them. Right. So I'm gonna rush through. You can read about these case studies. It's really well written. Now we're working with about 20 SMEs. So these 20 SMEs are at the end of their work with us. So I'm going to show you who they are. So instead of just having those 5 really close friends, now we are a really big community who are working from creative industry to environment sector to consultation and so on. And these are some of the things that we did with them, teaching them to do stakeholder management, to understand how to take responsible business decision, AI readiness assessment, how to apply open source as a means for ethics, and to allow their innovation work. And now we're working with them on finally what should you do with all the knowledge that you have. You can also reach out to Innovate UK. They have a lot of things which are not just for the UK. There are resources freely available, and they are always looking for consortia. These slides are shared so I can show you some of the impact. So this is where I want to finish. So all of these are Turing Way, and we know that this works, the community works, the skill building works. You need to spend time with people who you want to bring in the room. But from my perspective, all of these have taught me that you need to re-examine what open source ecosystem means. Applying open research and open science framework to all of these work allows us to see that there is more to open source than just that 8.8 trillion report that we all have been talking about. So this is very stale picture now, but it's always important to bring that picture where we talk about this random person. But of course, there are many, many random people who are not just there, they're everywhere. And that's where my analysis is, right? Like there's a lot of impact of open source in the community, on the environment, on the well-being of our communities, and we need to take care of that. So one of the things that open science allows us to see is that there is not just this random open source developer, but there are people who are users, researchers, public, mentors, trainers, community managers, data experts, ethicists, and so many roles that are not accounted for. So when we look for true cost of open source ecosystem, there's definitely more than 8.8 trillion that we are not currently appreciating. These areas are underfunded and they are underutilized. And that's where we need to ask for more investment from the academic perspective. But 2 days ago, Amanda came to the Turing and she said, but you can never put a single monetary value to these beautiful things. And I completely agree with her, but we do also need to find money. And we currently are seeking some of the testimonials from our committee members to understand how do we build case for sustainability for a project that we know is serving the community, but currently just depends on one institute to ensure that these resources are available for everyone. Right, so some things that I didn't talk about, don't have time for, is that I also lead a team of community managers who are working across the institute on different projects. And we are trying to work on now to form a cooperative so other people who are not based in the UK are working in community management can join us and use some of these work that we have done around professionalizing community management and other roles such as those that I showed you in the previous slide. And the last one, this is my nonprofit. We run cohort-based training and mentoring program for universities, for industries, for people from anywhere they're interested in. We have been working with also NASA, but we don't know if that project will continue because of recent changes. And we also do research, and currently we have started a project with Chan Zuckerberg Initiative on improving access to funding for marginalized communities so they can make use of open source a bit more than currently do. So with that, I'm going to finish and take any question you may have.
Thanks, Malvika. Nice talk. Your practitioner's hub was really interesting, and I was wondering if you could comment on how easy or how difficult is it to get SMEs to engage?
Yeah, so we were very strategic with who we wanted in the room. One thing I have learned is that you can't teach people who are not interested in learning. So we open a call for interest, so that people can write their expression of interest to us. We ask them very simple questions around, so why do you care about open? What would you give back to the community? If people don't answer those questions, we don't invite them to be part of our communities. We actually got about 50 applications for the second round, and we ended up selecting 23, of which 20 accepted. Of these 20, about 18 are very consistently engaging with us. There are a couple of SMEs who have very little resource to even engage outside their own work. And we are at the moment creating about 12 case studies. These people are very interested. Some of them have gone on to collaborate with each other. One of our, it's not SME, one of the applicants were coming from Rio de Janeiro Digital Transformation Department of Ministry. And they are working with one SME in the UK to build a chatbot that they can deploy in public sector and test it. And these kind of connections were really great because we didn't expect anything like that would happen. So I think the goal was to get the right people in the room So we can facilitate what we can, but get them to talk to each other and share their practice. We do have a lot of creative sectors who are working with Meta and big companies, but they're also working with BBC and independent artists. So they bring a lot of interesting cases for, ethics and data right and GDPR and things that actually doesn't fully apply to them, because what would happen if LLM is using all their work and manipulates their art in a way that they cannot recognize? Who secures their artistic freedom? So there are many conversations that we wouldn't have if we were just in our own tiny silo of academia. So I think having them interested in each other's work has been really rewarding to see. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question, direct question, before we go into the panel.
Thanks, Malvika. Super talk and a really, really fascinating and laudable initiative. So congratulations and well done on that. I was wondering, was there a cold start problem in terms of building the community? Like, how do you go from the start of a project to the end of where you are here at the moment?
I think our thing was tap into your friends network. For the first round, for all the things that I talked about, our initial groups were these 20 people who were just so nice that they wanted to experiment with you, and they wanted to do this thing because they cared for it. Same happened for these 5 organizations that we brought into Practitioners Hub. These were people we know were using the Turing Way, and they were willing to come and work with us. Same happened for OLS. We got 20 mentors who were usual suspects. You would see the carpentries and you will see them here, so they wanted to be part of it. And for the Turing Way, we work with Software Sustainability Institute that give fellowship to people every year. And fellowships are around how to improve use of software in research. So we invited about 10 or 15 fellows from the specific year to say, hey, do you want to share what you're doing in this book? And they were very keen. Fellowship allows them to pay for travels. They wanted to be in the same place. And now I have to say, I don't call myself lead in usual places because I am not leading any of the day-to-day things. These are community members who are keen to take on one part as their own responsibility, and my role is to make sure that I go out and make sure people know about it and that they can use it. So yeah, friends are the best people to bring into the room.